I know. Yeah, so as Steve mentioned, I'm from Gloucester, Mass, and where I have a shop and design and build furniture. I don't do much reproduction work, but when I do, and the reproduction work I've had has been Ming Dynasty Chinese furniture, which has fascinated me for a real long time, for a number of reasons. The designs of the pieces, and there's sort of a set number of a couple dozen pieces that seem to recur. The Ming Dynasty was from 1300 something or 1400 and ended in 1650. So it was sort of the epitome of the design and construction of these pieces. They were all hardwood. They were not painted. They were not, it was carving, but not ridiculously elaborate stuff that came later. So more clean lines, not shaker clean, but some are pretty close to that. Proportions and lines were just beautiful and timeless. And then, because I imagine some of you might share this, there's this geek element in Ming furniture, which is the joinery. They were put together mostly without glue. The glue available, and there was great hide glue, like hoof glue, rabbit skin glue, fish glue, whatever. It's fantastic glue, but not as good when you're dealing with oily, waxy tropical hardwoods. And that's what a lot of these pieces were made from. Wang Wili, which is, they go back and forth with the Linnaean nomenclature, but I think it's now called the Dalbergia, so it's a rosewood, and Zitan, which is a sandalwood, two important woods. Really hard, really waxy, really lousy to glue. So what's the solution? Intricate, interlocking, puzzle-like joinery. And some of these joints, pretty much, you only find in one part of one type of furniture, and that's where it is. And that's the only place it needs to be, but that's where you find this crazy joint. So that completely intrigued me, and I was able to take a deep dive in it, partly because I went to college in woodworking school in down. I'm short in in California, where there's a lot of influence of Asian art, etc. And we'd go to museums in San Francisco, not far away, and there was a great collection. But there was also this crazy museum up in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada, Renaissance, California. There's a story behind that story. But this group that was there collected and wrote about and expanded the scholarly understanding of this branch of furniture. They bought a bunch of it, the market was low, they studied it, they published books, helped the market go up, and then they sold it all and made a bunch of money for their group. But while they had that stuff, they had a museum, and I was able to go there twice. And they were really generous. They let us furniture nuts crawl around underneath and look at all the stuff, and it was really interesting. So fast forward to, at some point, I'm in Gloucester, and somebody brings me a piece of furniture to repair. I hate repair work, but he was a friend, so you do things for friends. And when I saw it, he had no idea what it was. My jaw dropped. It ended up being what I think is a real piece of Ming furniture, and I would not do what he wanted to do. He wanted sanding, and I was like, no. But at some point, the light went on. I had a chance to meet Nancy Berliner, curator of Asian art at the Peabody Essex then, and now I think at the MFA, and that allowed me to meet her. And this, she told me to take it apart. We were trying to find out if it was real or not. That's a pretty small table. She said the only way to really know is to look at the joinery, because the joinery went to hell in a handcart right at the end of the Ming Dynasty. 1655 happens, the regime changes, and I don't know how soon or how that even works, but suddenly the craftsmanship goes to blazes. And shortcuts appear in everything, and the style changes, and it just wasn't the same anymore. So this, and she said, you got to take it apart. And I was like, what? Take this antique apart? And so just tap it apart, no glue, right? We talked about that. And I put blankets down, took it apart, put labels on everything, and it was what she said it should be, and what my books told me it should be. And then the light goes on, and I said, oh, you've got this apart, you're going to put it back together, tighten it up, clean it up, but duh, make a copy. So that's when I made a reproduction of this piece. I've made 5 since, but here's the first one. It's a small hall table. The features about it that I think are really interesting are that the darn legs splay at such a subtle amount that this is what I love about that stuff, and it's the hardest damn sell if you're trying to, make a living at this stuff. Oh, here's why you should love this, because it's so subtle that you won't notice it. Yeah. I know. It's like you won't notice it until it's not at that splay. If they're 90 degrees, it looks like a table. When they have that splay to them, it suddenly looks, to me, really kind of amazing, and I don't know if that photo quite does justice to that.
Are they splayed in one direction or two?
Two. They're splayed from, great question, because some aren't in these in the lexicon of that work. This one was, and it means that everything you do is suddenly way more complicated, because your miters aren't 45. Everything is plus or minus a degree and a half, and it's maddening, but it's a route to reproducing the beauty that I find in this work.
So the table that you took apart,
Yeah.
from 16 something?
Yeah,
Holy shit.
yeah. I know. That's why I was afraid. I was like, oh, geez, be gentle, right, right. And what I did actually to visit that again is I put wedges inside of blind tenons where you wouldn't see them to tighten up the joint a little bit. I steel wooled off some of the grime and put some wax back on. I didn't really hoped not to touch the finish. I left all the rings and stuff he wanted out of there. No, Bruce, that's not going anywhere.
Where did you find this table?
Yeah, exactly. That's the question I asked him right off the bat. He said, oh, it's been in the family forever. I said, okay, how did you get it? His uncle, great uncle, was a molasses importer in Shanghai, China, in the 1920s and 30s. Right before this stuff started getting thrown in the fires because of the Cultural Revolution. Thou shalt not have bourgeois stuff, fancy stuff. We are just the people now, and that's so people hid it. The most famous writer, I guess, historian of that furniture that I know of, Wang Shishang, actually went to labor camp, I think, for years because he got caught hiding pieces of the furniture taken apart. It's all in that flat pack, but he was hiding it in his attic, and he got busted, and they sent him to labor camp. And then later, when times changed, and whoever the current, at that point, leader of China was, the moods changed, and he became an esteemed professor for exactly what he was thrown in jail for, or a labor camp, whatever. Yeah, right. Well, politics will do that.
My uncle got it in the 1920s. It was already 200 years old.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Bought it, shipped it home, along with, and I saw some of the other pieces that the family had, and they weren't the same. One, which I have because he just didn't pick it up, is made from parts of old furniture. So you can see the leftover joinery still exposed, but sort of hidden, half hidden in a part of the furniture. The wood is that rare that it's worth reusing, even with blatant patches. Wow. Anyhow, let's look at some of the features of the joinery. The top is rectilinear frame and panel. It's not, there's nothing, there's none of that degree and a half nonsense in the top. But here is how the top is put together. So you've got a mitered top. There wasn't a lot of tolerance for end grain in the culture. You've got, but the miters have a live tenon that, so one side of it, they didn't draw in, these are taken from a book, I didn't draw them. They didn't draw the mortise in that exposed, in the exposed face on that, the short part of the frame. You can see where that would have been. I can indicate it with some sort of a pointer if I can reach over there I don't think I can. But anyway, do you see where there, yeah, there would have been a mortise.
You see it
But-
on the bottom one.
Yes, you'd see it coming out the end, exactly. So one of these is relatively easy to cut. The other one, you have to go around the barn and find your scribe lines to make that mortise nice and perfect. The top is thin and somewhat flexible. They spent a lot of time figuring out what we all have to struggle with, which is wood movement. So how do you keep the top nice and flat, yet still able to move? That what they're calling that cross member, they're calling a penetrating transverse brace, is dovetailed, sliding dovetailed into the top. So the tops are 5/16 to 3/8 of an inch, kind of thin. Yet with this strong arm, strong back, holding the darn thing flat, and the sliding dovetail allows it to slide across the grain. You couldn't glue that; it's a cross grain joint. Even in quartered Wangwali or whatever that doesn't move too much. So that was the solution, which I think is a really elegant solution. Yeah.
When they would pin their furniture, would they use the same wood that they made the carcass out of, or a different wood?
I don't think they pinned it very often. You mean like pinning a tenon?
Like a dowel, yeah.
Yeah. I have seen them done with bamboo, and so not necessarily the same wood. But I've also seen no pins at all. Maybe wedges on the outside if it got older and a little rickety, but I'm not sure that from the beginning wedges were even used.
So it's just friction fit?
Yep. Yep.
So the holes on the faces of the, say the ends?
Yeah.
What are those?
Those are it's a through tenon.
Well, the through tenon comes out the end.
Yeah.
The side.
Yeah.
It's on the
The
top.
flat
Oh, that's upside down, and that's how the legs and the bottom of it attaches.
Okay.
Yes, good question. Because yeah, the picture to the left is doesn't show those.
So the legs are holding it together?
Part of it, yeah, yeah. It all interlocks. They come apart, but you got to choose the right.
In order?
Yeah, the right order, right. The right piece has to come apart. We'll get involved in the piece I'm going to. I have a piece here to show you. We'll get more involved in that one in a minute. Here's some other. There you go. Here's some other examples of the joinery. This. I'm not going to pass that one around. This one I didn't finish. When I was, you probably know, or some of you know that I taught for a long time at Phil Lowe's wonderful school in Beverly, Mass. He'd have open houses, and when I was at open house at Phil's, I would try to work on a Chinese joint. And here's one I didn't finish, but I started on it, so it's actually that one here. If that one wants to go around the world, you want to take this and understand it's not done, but it may not be since we don't have Phil's open houses anymore. But that is a pretty complicated guy where there's not just it's a sliding tapered dovetail, so it locks, but you have to cut it you have to lay it out and cut it just so. Like all handwork, it's layout, the layout is the most important thing. Obviously cutting to the lines, but if you lay it out well, you can make these things work. Sometimes the layout is a head scratcher. The next joint to look at in some depth is a pretty well-known one in this world. It's one of the ones that people like the most. This sort of continuous back armchair. Yeah.
I just wondered if these woodworking techniques are being taught currently in China.
That's a great question. Probably not a whole lot, but there was an exhibit a number of years ago at the Peabody Essex Museum where they gave X number of furniture artists from Asia as well as from here access to their collection and said, hey, reinterpret this. And one of the people from China took traditional Chinese forms and did nothing but bend them in funny shapes. So that person, or the people working for him, with them, reproduced those joints. How they learned them, I don't know. It might have been just for that.
You're probably teaching IKEA joinery.
Yeah. There's stories there. Yeah. This stuff is the original IKEA. That piece, they flat pack. They cost more than IKEA.
Hey, John, what would be the, I mean, there seem to be similarities between the Chinese joinery like this and Japanese joinery.
Maybe. My sense,
walking
I'm not an expert on this stuff, so this is grain of salt stuff or just throw out the window stuff. But Krenov told us that there really wasn't much furniture in Japan. In his opinion, the house is the furniture. The house and the amazing Japanese, and there's absolutely amazing woodworkers. No one's going to question that, right? In Japan, but much of their work is focused on temples and temple rebuilding, constantly rebuilding, because this temple, not like Notre Dame needs it once every several thousand years, 800 years, but every several years these things have to get completely redone, and the pieces get all remade, and all the joinery is replaced piece by piece, like keeping a wooden boat running. You're constantly fixing it, and so the sense is that I have is that furniture was really important in China in this era at least, and a lot of that joinery was focused on the furniture, and a lot of the crazy and just as amazing but different application joinery in Japan was focused on architectural structures, and usually larger format and usually in softwoods. And this stuff is very much in hardwoods. Does that answer that at all? Okay. So this joint, from the continuous back armchair, that last slide, was a way to make this chair without laminating, without steaming, because that, if you've ever steamed wood, you usually look for an open grain, somewhat wet wood. I'm sure you could get this wood wet at the time, but it's not very open grain, and it's really hard stuff. It was made with 5 or 6, either 4 joints, 5 pieces, or 5 joints, 6 pieces, I'm not sure which, but they were basically just splices that happened before the grain got too short, before it got to be, dangerously likely to break. And here's a, not wonderfully constructed, but here's a version of that joint. I'll pass this one around too. So the tenons are housed, and a peg locks them together. The peg would be cut off flush, but you can. I've never built that chair, but it's a common form that Hans Wegner stole and revisited, and other people have, and it's a beautiful form. Here's another one that's kind of interesting. And I have one of these. We don't need this. This is an all-purpose tenon tree. I made it to show different joints to different people. But if you've got, now this table design down low has really thin legs that look like they might get a little wobbly. If I was designing that, I'd be strongly drawn towards stretchers of some sort somewhere, because there's not a lot of support there, and someone kicks that, with their Ming Dynasty vacuum cleaner, it goes right over. So, but their solution were these braces that came in at a 45 and held the thing. They call it the giant's arm brace. There, you can, they even have the name there. Oh, and there's your wood or bamboo nail. Actually, it's not in a visible spot, but that would be pegged. But the way that joint fits into the leg, I know it's not on the 45, but it would be in a flat, is a sort of hidden dovetail where this mortise is straight, seeing through it on this side, and it's at an angle here, so that the piece, which has an angle to it, goes in and up, and a peg goes in there, and I had to put a little, string on the peg so I could take it back apart. But that's going nowhere. This is a little sloppy, but that can go around also. This one here
Challenge for next year's.
is a little bit closer to the table that I made, in that we've got these spandrels. This is a slightly different construction. There's no miters on these. This is more complicated. I think this is stronger. It certainly takes more time. Therefore, I'm going to advocate in its favor. The leg is slotted, and there is one part of this spandrel is a flat face, and the other has once again a shallow sliding dovetail in the back. So it's held quite rigidly, and these legs, even without those stretchers, are really going nowhere. It's a pretty darn sturdy design. You have to labor to cut that dovetail one way or another. I cheated and did it on a router table. But when you take a round leg and cut the middle out of it, you get 1/2 of a dovetail for free. Because when you've taken the middle out of it, only the middle is tangential to what you're cutting. Once you get a little bit towards that round, it's an angle. And so you've got 1/2 of this dovetail given to you gratis. And you can...
Is the sliding part in the back on the piece? Is it,
Yeah.
The sliding part is in the back?
Yes,
Okay.
it is. I don't know if that was always that way, but I copied what was in front of me when I made it. And that's how that worked.
Did you cut the
That
slot?
piece fell and got damaged a bunch of times, and I didn't have the time to make another example, so that's why it's a bit of a mess.
Did you cut the slot by hand, John? As far as the...
Nope. No, I did as much as I could with machines, I confess.
After the pieces that you sent around to get through the front row, could you send them back to the back row?
Oh, yeah, make sure everyone gets them. Good point. There's another one here, if you'll go back to slides, which is, they call it in some cases a wine glass table, and it's another version of this joint where there isn't really a spandrel, but there's just a bridle joint at an angle, and what holds the bridle together is where it fits into the frame in the tabletop. So this would be kind of weak until the table sits down and all of that is held together. So it's more of that whole interlocking.
Would the table be locked down with some key or something? That's my thing.
Probably just gravity and a friction fit. Well, those that I've seen have been that. And I chose this grain very carefully. It's one piece of wood that I wanted to see the grain do that. So, yeah, they would have cut it all by hand, which brings us to the next point. This was 1650s. Not a lot of electricity, except in the atmosphere, right? Ben Franklin. Hand planes were a big deal. They look very much like ours, except they're pulled like the Japanese, but they have this bar that goes through them. And I don't own one of these, but I've used a version of one of these, and what a lot of power you can get on that thing. You can really lean down and take off some material if you need to. Some of the other tools look very familiar. A square with a little decorative end on it, but a square is a square, and stuff that needs to be square needs to be square. That's a saw, very much like a back saw, just wood instead of more metal, and a molding plane. But if you notice, it's kind of hard to see the detail. There's a shape on there, a profile like a molding plane, but the angle seems to be much higher than ours. And think of when you're working with tough woods, if you have it, you'll get out maybe your York pitch. You're playing with a higher angle frog, or even a scraper plane, something that goes past 90. In this case, that looks like it's a pretty darn. It's not quite scraping, but it's thinking about it. And this I find to be the most interesting. This is a tool that I don't know has a a parallel in our culture. They call this the centipede or scraper plane. I think setting it up would be a bear, but it's just a whole bunch of scrapers in a row.
Are they toothed?
I don't think so. This isn't for prepping veneer. This is for giving you a smooth surface. It's working over 90 like this. So I think that handle is pushing, and your other hand's on top. So I don't think it's pulling. I think it's pushing. Do you see how that's working? You've got it like a cabinet scraper, but 10 of them in a row.
Have you ever seen one?
No, and I haven't. If I had nothing to do but study Chinese furniture, I'd make one in a heartbeat, but that would take a little while. And like I say, I think setting it up would be a bit of work.
Especially with the tools of the age.
Yeah, they've got to all line up,
Yeah.
or maybe be in a slight arc. But I've been working recently in a nasty tropical hardwood, and I have made 2 scraper planes just to help that along, and what a difference that made. So I understand that. I think instrument makers in earlier times used glass a lot for scraping. And sometimes for finishing, but sometimes for wood removal. Think violin making, think hollowing out a maple back or something. I think a piece of a chosen piece of broken glass could help you a whole lot. Another aspect of, so to move forward with let's look at this furniture as a design motif and think about how it might affect modern design. And here are some chairs. I don't know if both of them are Hans Wegner chairs, but certainly this lower one here is a really famous design of his that is clearly taken right from Chinese furniture. I saw that and I was like, have all the good designs been taken? Because I want to do something with these. They're really fun and beautiful. Here is on the left is a sort of a shelving unit. I'm doing something with that concept right now because I find it really intriguing. Not the lattice back. I don't have the patience to do that out of hardwood. But this chair on the right was made in 1650 or so in China. And to me, it looks an awful lot like the Vasily Kandinsky chair made by Brouwer. I don't have a picture of it, out of tubular steel and leather seating in the 1930s. And you think that some of these designs are brand new? Well, dig back and find the culture. There's an Art Deco, an aside, there's an Art Deco designer builder, Ramsey, I think, who built all these beautiful pieces, had built all these beautiful pieces using animal motifs. And in the 1920s and 30s in Paris, and I saw some of that work, and all I could think of was Judy Kenzie McKee. Her work seems really original to me. Look at this work from the 30s. Stuff has antecedents. Stuff comes from somewhere. It should give us all encouragement, right? We can all do this, yeah?
Is there any evidence that the Chinese used obsidian as a scraping medium?
I don't know of any. I'm not the scholar, but it certainly makes sense. Obsidian is essentially glass, right? Yeah, I could see that. I guess I bet some of this is geographical, right? If you find a spot where that exists naturally, you'll find it being used in the culture. I would think. There's these buildings in Norwich, England. They're all made of flint. All the stones in them, all the stones in the walls are these round flint stones, and they just look like balls or whatever. And the fancy places, the churches, someone would have napped them all in half, so you have a flat face, and they're all like these little eggs with these beautiful, almost obsidian-like hard flint. So, because they found it there. So now this is the egotistical part of the program. I decided that this chair hadn't been co-opted and turned into a modern creation by some current designer. So I thought, okay, let's see what we can do. And I came up with these. They're a little cut off in the image, but I came up with this version of Western seating with a very obvious Ming Chinese upstairs portion. And they've been kind of a well-received chair of mine. That's white oak, and I chose the white oak because if I made it in a dark redwood, it would say Chinese furniture, and I was trying to test my design skills to see, gee, can this work in this modern context? So, plus I love white oak.
When you made your through tenons, how did you lock them in? Mechanically or some other way?
I use glue. B,
That was the-
this is not a copy to that extent. The copy in this, good question though, the copy in this instance is copying the design ideas. Those black, those are wedges of probably Wenge, because I wanted them to contrast. And I used a attachment to my Bridgeport to make slip tenons, because I firmly believe that trying to make in this modern world with our equipment, trying to make a tenon at an angle or the mortise that way by having a live tenon seems like a crazy exercise in futility that also often leaves you with short-grained tenons. And if you can cleanly make a mortise in your end grain, you can make slip tenons, and I think they can be stronger. Here's where I did make that one for a client, that same chair, slight variation in dark red wood, East Indian rosewood, old cut stuff from Hearn hardwoods that the client was very adamant about, and I had to learn how to carve to do that too. But
Is that front stretcher meant as a footrest?
yep, it is. And I kind of scooped it out a little bit. That wouldn't have been done in the day, but all the existing ones are worn that way. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that was a fun piece to make. There's this almost useless armrest support that you see in the Chinese stuff that is, to me, so beautiful that I couldn't leave it out. Here's another version of my work coming from the influence of that Chinese piece. So I tried to interpret the concept of a cabinet with a display unit on top in that piece. And even though the cabinet part has 90-degree perpendicular sides, if you think about the legs, they have a bit of an angle to them. So that starts to hint at what this cabinet does. That's a really horrible, distorted picture. Sorry about that, the traditional piece. But we've got that same 1.5 degrees of splay that doesn't just occur in the tables in much of the Ming furniture. It occurs in cabinets. It occurs in the chairs. I forgot to mention that. But this 1.5 degrees seems to be a pretty important number in getting in approaching the look and feel of that era. I didn't copy the original hardware at all. That hardware works as a lock, because in some of these pieces, and again, I didn't copy this part of it, the center stile would be fixed. So this door would open and that door would open and there would be a stick in the middle, which enabled you to put a stick through and fasten a lock on it, a tapered stick through, or one with a knob on it, and fasten a padlock of some sort on the other end, and your cabinet is locked. So that's why they did that, and I just make my own hardware. And it's very decorative, and this shows that. But there again is a cabinet that's tapered with Gloucester motif hardware. Here's a couple other example of carving, an example of a copy of a Chinese, not quite exactly a Chinese table, but because I did glue up that one entirely, and my friend the Queen sneaks into most of my photographs, or tries to. And then a last image of some work that less influence, but it's still there. There's still some influence from this culture in what I tend to do. in angles, in curves, and things like that. Here, we can start to talk about the piece that I brought with me, and fine woodworking threw me a bit of a lifesaver during COVID, and agreed to publish a two-part article on making this piece of furniture. It showed up in these two issues, and you might, if you get that, you might have seen it. But it's building this this table. And when they first contacted me about it, I said, "Are you serious? Is anyone really going to make this thing that's so ridiculously complicated it takes me forever to do?" And John Binzen assured me that I should write it, and that they would, pay me if it published or not. So I said, "Really? Okay." He kind of lied. He paid me half, and then said he would only pay me the rest if it did publish. And I thought, oh well, that's that. When are they going to possibly run this? But they finally did, and ran it in 2 segments. So it was actually quite good to do. And John Binzen is a really great person to work with.
The other half?
Yeah, did. Thank you very much. Yeah. So here's just some shots of starting to put together that joint up there. This shows the tool that I found indispensable in carving out the fit of a tenon to a round leg, a shoulder to a round leg, coping that shoulder. And that's the tool which I previously thought was just a crazy tool. Why would anyone own or use this tool? It's a gouge with the bevel on the wrong side, unless you like to torture yourself with difficult sharpening. But it is an awesome tool.
Yeah.
It's the way to do that work. Yeah, in-cannel gouge. It's yeah, I think you can buy them. I did not make, good question.
You can buy them.
Yeah,
They're all over eBay.
yeah.
They're referred to as a pattern maker's scale.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, a trade that's disappearing because of the advent of 3D printing and stuff like that. It's far easier to go from a computer to something made in plastic, and that becomes a pattern that can be cast from. Other tools that were indispensable. I've got this square that isn't square. A little starret that you can set it. Oh, it's another pattern maker's tool. It's the square that isn't square. It's set right now, so please don't set it. But one of these tightens like everything else.
Set angles with it.
Yeah, yeah. And the other adjusts the blade on it.
The new version of that, without the settings, about $150-something bucks or $60-something right now.
Yeah.
Please don't drop it. But here's a little video of that piece that went around earlier. Try this. Yeah. As you saw this, but the other part comes apart too. You can, these are, they're not 45, they're like 46 and a half or 43 and a half, however it works, inch and a half off, a degree and a half off. And you can fit these, with a block plane or any plane and a sort of a shooting board setup. You can fit some of this. Some of it happened with a table saw, some of it happened with a router table. But how the heck do you get these shoulders dead on? I suppose you could guillotine down with a chisel. That would be good. But the most controlled way I found was, for some reason, I bought or someone gave me this stupid toy rabbit plane from Veritas. Right. It's got a ridiculously wide open throat. It's not what you would want if you made the tool to actually work. but the darn steel sharpens, the tool works, and it fits through that spot. So you can you see that?
Let's use it.
So you can pair that darn shoulder. So this thing, which I thought was a ha-ha, look at this silly toy I've got, became a really useful tool. And I'm small, so I guess I guess it worked well that way. Anyhow, here is an image of the last couple of these tables that I made. And then we can put one together right here. The first one I made out of African Padouk, because at the time it was easier to get. It wasn't fraught, and it seemed to have a pore structure, color, etc. that wasn't too far from the Wang Li, which seemed impossible to get. I can't stand the color of Padouk, the way it comes off the saw or a plane, but if you give it some time and some sunlight, oxygen, it becomes kind of nice. Somewhere I've got an image of this tape, of the next one. There. That one is now really dark red and beautiful. I've seen the wood go to brown, which is not so pleasant, but a really dark red to me is gorgeous for this stuff. And that means...
Little relief on the back, that takes the top, right?
What's that?
At the very top of the post is a little relief on the back
Yeah, the relief is the depth stop
of the top.
of the top. Right, because when it goes into the top, that makes it stop exactly right there. Yes. So this should go like this. And this should go like this. And then this one can go around while I try to put the other one together. I get it. There you go. Pass that one around. And these are, what, 2 years old at this point? So,
Had this assembled and unassembled dozens of times?
yeah.
IKEA.
Right. Wait, wrong way.
Yeah.
Is that right? No, that's not right. Yeah, this is how this has to go. Yeah, okay. It can be confusing. And cherry is not the best wood for this. It moves a little more than I'd like.
What would be your choice of wood?
Well, Wang Li, but
Available woods.
oh, available woods. Yeah, I'm not sure. Probably something that one shouldn't use, like a tropical hardwood.
The panel is beveled?
Hmm?
The panel is beveled.
Yeah, this was how the original was done. The panel was beveled. I think the one change I made to the design is I put 2 transverse braces on the top, and I think there was just one. So that's the front. Yep, and that's the front. I stamped everything with this version of the triangle, so you can see my attempt to turn stamps into, they don't come with triangles, they come with like letters and stuff and numbers.
It looks pretty good, yeah.
Two that I've made out of Padouk, the miters are much tighter and they stay that way. Padouk is one of the 2 most stable woods in my understanding. The other being teak. Teak would be great to make in it. but you know, the top right, the molding is different, and this is a tapered instead of a rabbet to get down to that thin point. I was just copying what they did. I don't love the idea of tapered panels, the back of panels being tapered to get to that thin bit, because when you're in the slot, you're bearing on a corner instead of bearing on the whole slot. So if I can, I like to put some sort of a rabbet or a shape in there that gives you a parallel tongue going into the groove. But that's not how they were done traditionally, so this was a copy, so etc.
Like they used to do when they did doors in the old days, they just tapered it and fit it in.
Like that. Yeah.
Instead of having that, like the modern.
Well, what's the difference between doing something with a hand plane and doing it with a shaper or a router table? The refinement of the design came with the refinement of the machines, which is why this work, not as I do it, but as done historically, was just completely amazing. And I find it to be plenty interesting, difficult, and challenging, fascinating to do it with modern machines. No. Another reason it broke down, back to the politics of the time. My understanding of the running of Chinese empire was that many bureaucratic positions were shifted every few years geographically, significantly. Like if you were governor of this province, in 3 years you'd be governor 500 miles away, so that there would be less graft and corruption. It's not a bad idea. It doesn't work as well with jet travel. But your furniture would go with you. It would all break down and go on an ox cart, on barge, right. Back to that. Yeah. But it could travel that way because of its glueless nature.
And these pieces come apart?
No, that's a great question. That was the one joint on the original table that was glued up. So I took advantage of that and decided, you know, those miters will stay tight and look better if I did glue them. Yeah, good point. That's why I bring that example piece around, to show people how that joint is constructed, because that one doesn't come apart. Yeah. Exactly.
So what finishes do you put on this, if anything?
I put on oil, and I'm pretty sure I used a modern oil at Watco or something because I wanted it to dry. When I've used tung oil in the past, which they might very well have used, it took so long to dry that I didn't have that kind of time. And then after it was dry a few days, and also oiling cherry, if you want the cherry to get color, you know, that deep brown color eventually, which this won't do as quickly because it's wrapped up all the time, oil it first and then do whatever you want to do, but it'll get darker quicker if it's been oiled before. And then I used a wax recipe from the Encyclopedia of Furniture Making. My favorite Solve Almost All the Problems book by Ernest Joyce, the Alan Peters edition. That's the book. It's got a recipe for beeswax and turpentine. You know, one of these, heat it up, but use a double boiler because turpentine over the fire can get a little dangerous. Which wax goes on, it doesn't give you a shiny finish, but it feels great and it smells wonderful because turpentine is awesome. Yeah. But again, just using a more available and more reliably drying oil like Watco or something seems to give me a very similar and nice result. If you would put that down upside, yeah, perfect. And where is front and where is back? Okay, I'm at the back, so this is this way. No, it's okay. Now, before I put this together, actually, let's do it this way. These are the full blind miter corners, and they go together.
And that's just, oh, that's captured inside the,
Yeah.
that's captured inside the top.
There's just enough spring in this whole structure to.
So they did dovetails in 1355.
Oh yeah. Oh, probably at the dawn of each culture's building. You know, it's such a classic thing. The hand goes in the cookie jar and can't get out once it grabs the cookies. Yeah, no, that so many of these joints have an element of that dovetail. The sliding dovetail here, maybe not these, which are those tenons with a miter on the end of them. This time of year is doing this demo at Center for Furniture Craftsmanship in August on the coast of Maine. I'm banging on this thing to get it out, banging on him to get him in, and not that there won't be some banging later, but here is this piece standing. Oh, could go together a little tighter, couldn't it? Nope, didn't get that quite tight. You can hear the sound change, right? When it seats. That last one seated nicely. Okay, try again. There we go. And to see it, now see the display? I don't think so. And here it is about where you'd see it and live with it. Again, wish the miter stayed tighter, but there you go. There's a piece of Chinese furniture that I copied and learned a heck of a lot from. What I don't have a strong grasp of is the sort of mystical, spiritual stuff that imbues a lot of Chinese culture, and people have told me that that's what's lacking in my scholarship of this stuff. There's a massive demand for the originals. That is the aspect of the antique market that is still strong. American antique furniture, imagining that it might be popular again, it's a great time to buy, which means it's dirt cheap, but not classical Chinese furniture.
What would you say the price point is?
For an original,
Yeah.
this small piece, 20 to 50 grand, depending on its shape. Chairs, 150 to 250 each, 1,000. Yeah. Any other questions? That's basically my presentation.
Thank you.